they traded the platinum sound for dignity, honor, and respect, and then claiming that they sold what they stole. Today we're actually talking about something pretty freaking cool. Somebody, and I apologize for forgetting their name. We had a follower post a pretty good idea not too long ago about talking about MushroomHead and kind of the controversy that surrounded this band for a very long time. And so that's what we're going to go over today. And obviously there's been a lot of different things that we've all seen, in the news and, just out there, but there's a lot of stuff that's happened behind the scenes and stuff too. And it's pretty shocking. I mean, if you look up their Wikipedia page, holy smokes,
I bet
there is a ton of information, but they've had dude, it's been like a revolving door of people coming in and out of the band and stuff, and how many members they got? 8 or 9? Same as Slipknot? Is it
I think it's 9. Yeah.
9, something like
they
that.
They may have cut it down and not replace somebody or added another just to get away from the number 9. I don't know. And I'll be fully transparent with you. You're a much bigger fan than I was
of
MushroomHead. Not because I didn't like it, because I absolutely did.
Yeah.
I'll jam Sun Doesn't Rise, every once in a while.
I really like MushroomHead.
Not to go down that road, but
I am not like,
so you're more of the connoisseur than I.
Yeah, I get that. And again, I wouldn't say I'm like this huge kind of, not that there's anything wrong with it or whatever. I don't have any like tattoos of them or anything like that, but yeah, I do like MushroomHead. And, especially the really early stuff. They once, and nothing against Waylon at all, but once Waylon kind of joined, it was like when J-Man left and stuff, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm digging this anymore. And they kind of started going a little bit of a different direction. And then it just, and again, not to disparage the band, because I love the band, but it just started getting a little too commercialized, a little too on the nose, and less artistic, like overly artistic, to the point where it's like, this is just kind of a machine now that's predictable, and but that's just my only qualm. But outside of that, I mean, they've always been great songwriters and stuff, and it's
they did some newer stuff, newer in the last 5-6 years that I really enjoyed, and have enjoyed it to the point where I don't remember the name of the song. But they got in this habit of making like really cool music videos.
Yes.
So it's like,
it's almost like horror films and stuff.
Yeah, very like elaborate.
They put a lot to their aesthetic, that's for sure.
And so I remember starting to get into some of those. But yeah. And I do remember way back when we would be talking about MushroomHead, and I knew that you were a big fan of J-Man. And I mean, you guys have a very similar kind of vocal delivery too,
right?
So
and I and then, to be honest with you, I wouldn't say I'm like a huge fan of J-Man, but I just liked the contrast to him with Jeffrey Nothing. Like, for whatever reason, it just really felt like, and I'm going to forget names here, but it just really felt like, I've brought this up before, where Jeffrey Nothing, I feel, sounds like the lead singer to the is it the Cult or the Cure? The Cult. Cult. And I don't, who?
Ian Ashbury?
Yes, there you go. Yes. And so I just like, I don't know if he does that on purpose or it's just his natural voice or whatever. I think I read a long time ago that he actually was like one of his idols and stuff like that. So I could see that. But either way, I remember the first time. Here we go. We're going to jump right into, where does it take you? But I remember the first time I heard MushroomHead, and I remember exactly where I was in my car and everything. And I don't remember what song it was, though. Was it Bump or something? I can't remember either which way. It was the first song that came out, and it was on 89.7 The River, and it came out. And I just remember thinking, is this Slipknot with somebody? Because again, J-Man's vocals were close enough, with kind of the low kind of guttural delivery with a little bit of a rap style to it. Then I'm like, is that Corey?
Corey.
And then the singing was happening. And I was like, okay, wait a minute, is this Slipknot with the guy from the Cult? And then I just remember it got done, and I was like, and they didn't say who it was. It was like I turned on the radio and it was just starting. The song was already just starting. And so they must have said who it was before. So I was
Mm.
hoping that they would say who it was after, and they didn't. And then, dude, I was like racking my mind, for like days because I kept turning on the radio. I'm like, who the heck was that? I was waiting for
Yeah.
it to come on again. And then finally it did like a couple weeks later. And then I was like, oh my gosh, okay, it's a band called MushroomHead. All right. And so I've just kind of digged them ever since. But
Yeah.
yeah. But either which way,
So
controversy.
yeah, controversy. Like I feel like I'm kind of on the outside. Like I don't really know
Oh man.
any of this except that there was kind of, a revolving door of members,
Yeah.
to the point where those ex-members can do a whole tour with each other.
Which
The
yes.
X Faces tour.
The
And I'm
X
like, there's
Faces,
enough of you guys
No,
that you can tour?
dude, that's such a
Wow, okay.
weird
Good for
and
you.
right, it is. It's cool. I would go see it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But it is kind of weird. And what I mean by weird is like imagine like what you just said. Imagine that there's enough people that they go form their own band.
Yeah.
I mean, and like how would you feel like my mind immediately goes to like all my ex-girlfriends like getting together and like having a party or something like that, dude, and just being like, F this guy, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like one big like bitch fest,
Right, right.
and everybody just bitches about the one person who's not there.
Correct. Yeah. And they, I think they all get along still. There was definitely, I think most of them get along, but there's definitely some that don't.
I knew there were a handful that were like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
not cool.
Exactly. But
Mhm.
it is what it is. I mean,
And I don't want to get too far ahead, but like somebody just sued
yep, we'll get there.
Skinny. Okay.
Yep. We'll get there. We'll get
okay.
there. So either which way, so again, we don't have to go through the whole history of the band or whatever, but if most people don't know, they were started in 1993 in Cleveland, Ohio. I believe most people know who Skinny is. I mean, so Steve Felton, he goes by Skinny. Him and Jeffrey Nothing started the band, but they also had like J-Man, JJ Righteous, who was the guitarist, and then Joe Kilconey. I can never say his name right. Kilcoyne, I think is his name. And then the keyboardist was Schmatz. So Tom Schmitz was his name, but he went by Schmatz. And then DJ Joe or DJ Joe Linky, who also went by DJ Virus. So they started the band. That was like their first, iteration, and they kind of took off pretty quick. And so right out of the gate, they had crazy masks. They had the boiler suits. They had like this whole industrial horror aesthetic. Just the visual concept really stood them out. And this was back in 93. Okay.
Yeah.
And so this is the first part of the weirdness of what's going on and just the the controversy of what we're talking about today. Okay, so they're doing their thing and they're freaking killing it in Cleveland, right? Roadrunner comes to them in 1997 and says, we want to sign you. So they were approached by Roadrunner, which is not usually the story that kind of comes out there, obviously.
They were solicited.
Yes, they were solicited. Yes. We've talked about this before, folks.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, keep in mind, 1997, Roadrunner was known for, probably Typo and some other bands, but nobody outside of Typo was pretty big, but nobody was huge yet, especially in like the nu metal era of Roadrunner, which you can listen on our last Roadrunner episode.
I think it was the last episode. Yeah.
Last episode 40. Look it up. But anyway, so they were approached by Roadrunner, and Jeffrey Nothing said, we're just going to turn you guys down because their deal was less than what they were doing on their own in Cleveland. And so they're just like, well, yeah, they're just like, why would we get this small money and sign our lives away to you guys when we're actually out here just in Cleveland crushing it ourselves? And so, yeah, I guess like the advance that was offered, and then the label demanded like all these merchandise rights of their own.
Sure.
And so they're just like, we're not going to do that. Like, we're freaking killing it. So they turned it down.
Monte? Was that Monte Connor?
I think it was. It didn't say if it was Monte or not. It probably was.
He got his revenge then.
He sure did. But whoever it was did. So anyways, so then in 1998, Roadrunner signed Slipknot. obviously from Des Moines,
Mm.
Midwest, blah 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 blah. So there's always this thing that's like people go back and forth, dude, and they fight over this. They've been fighting over this for years and stuff, like who was first, and everything. And but again, that was the first controversy was, the Mushroomhead could have been Slipknot, or what I'm saying, where it's like they could have been the band that blew up,
That did that
Roadrunner.
whole thing. Yeah.
And I really wonder if it would have, because it's like you think about the song that first came out from Slipknot was Wait and Bleed, and it definitely grabs your attention. And then
Mhm.
you think about the first song that was Mushroomhead and grabs your attention. However, I gotta say, not I hate to compare because these guys are always compared, but I gotta say, I think the most impactful was Slipknot, because Mushroomhead, albeit very good, was not that like, what is happening here? It was like, oh, that's cool. Oh, what's this? What's this? Slipknot was like, boom, and it was like,
Mhm.
holy crap! It was just such a enigma of sound that
Yeah.
nobody had really done before. And so either which way, I don't know, we can get into that later and stuff, but so that was the first controversy about like that's traveled with both of these bands of who was first and da 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 da, who copied who. And being that they're both from the Midwest, um I don't know. I don't know if somebody saw somebody and decided we're going to do it as well, but I mean, looking at the timeline of things, Mushroomhead, they were doing masks and they were doing jumpsuits and stuff way before Slipknot came around. And
Yeah.
so it's hard to believe that 9 dudes were doing this thing mere hours away, and what I mean, in Cleveland, and who are making a huge impact for a couple few years. And then somebody else in the Midwest area also did masks with jumpsuits with 9 guys. And it's hard to say, like it's almost too uncanny, too
Yeah.
happenstantial to not, what I mean? Where
Yeah.
it's like, was that where they set out to be exactly that? I don't know. Who knows? And it could just be completely happenstantial. Who knows? But
Yeah. I mean, I think too, Slipknot, I mean, they took it quite a bit further, I think, just
right,
musically. Excuse me. It's like just I mean, if you just listen to the drums, I mean, you listen to Joey and Skinny, it's like Joey is doing absolutely crazy. It was more chaotic where Mushroomhead was a little bit more, kind of up the middle. They weren't taking a whole lot of chances, you know what I
right,
mean?
right.
Where Slipknot was. But yeah, I mean, is it possible? Sure.
Yeah,
That they saw it and were like, okay, yeah, cool. But, that's the biz, man.
it is the biz, and that's
That's,
the thing. It's
that's the music business,
right,
music industry. And if you put eyes on something that, influences you, or you're like, oh, cool, that's rad. I kind of want
right.
to do something like that. And then it kind of, takes off.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is like that's another thing that, yeah, I still see it today, and people are just misinformed or whatever. But I see it today where a lot of people say Roadrunner created Slipknot, and
No, that's
I'm
not
like,
true.
no, no, no. It's the timelines don't line up with that at all, and there's so much
I mean,
video
we know that
evidence
for a
of everything.
fact.
Yeah,
Yeah, we know
exactly.
that for a
We
fact.
know that for a fact. We know too many people on
Hmm.
the inside. But again, like I said, it does, I don't know. I mean, you can have, I mean, it just wasn't a common thing back at that era to
Right,
have 9. I mean, it's still not common to have 9 people in a band
right,
and to
right.
have masks
Well,
and to wear
he,
jumpsuits and stuff, but
right. Well, here's the other thing too. It's like, Slipknot did everything right and
yep.
Mushroomhead did everything wrong.
Yeah.
So, it's like going back to our last episode, you made a comment, it's like if you have these three things, you're gonna kill it. And that was
Yeah.
Ross Robinson,
Yep.
Roadrunner Records, and
Yep.
Ozfest. Slipknot had all three,
Yeah.
Mushroomhead did not.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't
Yeah.
think they
But you
have
got to
anybody to
wonder.
blame but themselves
I
on
agree.
that one.
However, with that, you got to wonder. So if Mushroomhead signs with Slipknot, do they go with Ross Robinson?
Or signs it was Roadrunner, you mean?
Or yeah, what did I say? Slipknot?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Long day, dude. It's late,
Yeah.
actually. We're not used to recording this late.
We're recording pretty late
We're
tonight. Yeah.
recording pretty late tonight. But yeah, okay, so if signs with Roadrunner, would they have
Mhm.
had Ross produce it?
I mean, you and I know just because we have inside info,
Yeah,
on Slipknot that was the whole point.
it was the
They
whole point.
wanted
Yeah,
Ross and they wanted Roadrunner and they got it.
yeah,
I don't know what Mushroomhead wanted. I don't know. I don't think that Mushroomhead, and I mean, we say this a lot. I mean,
yeah.
no disrespect when I say what I'm about to say.
Right.
Um, I don't think Mushroomhead could have withstood a Ross Robinson production. I don't think their
Oh
music
yeah,
was kind of his cup of tea.
yeah,
Like Ross Robinson is very much like your song and your music has to have like an emotional, like a very visceral emotional reaction,
yeah.
and your performance needs to be part of that. And I don't necessarily think that Mushroomhead had that wasn't their deal. You know, they were doing the horror thing, they were doing, that kind of stuff. And, if you really look at the stuff that Corey was doing, like he
Right.
like those songs are like crazy personal and he was crazy
Yes.
emotional in the studio. Same with Iowa, which was also a Ross production. But bands like Slipknot and Korn, like that is Ross Robinson, because
Right.
it's very visceral and very emotional and you know cathartic, we'll
Right.
say. Look at what he did with Machine Head. you know like these guys are crying in a vocal
Right. Right.
booth.
Right.
I don't see Machine Head fitting into that.
Mushroom Head, you mean?
Or Mushroom Head, might
Yep.
say Machine Head.
Yeah.
um
Again, long day.
there's a head joke there that I'm
Yes.
not gonna make. um
Yep. No, I hear you.
a lot of head in new metal.
That's
um
right.
yeah, there it
There it
was.
is.
Anyways, here's my formal apology for
Yep.
that.
Knocked that out of the park. There you go.
But you know what I mean. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily know if they would have gotten the same end result that
Well,
Slipknot did.
yeah, but food for thought with that.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
listening
pure
to
speculation on our
yep, yep,
part, but
listening to Mate Feed Kill Repeat, right?
Mhm.
And again, very artistic. Again, very visceral, very chaotic, record, very sloppy, no offense to
Well,
those guys. Um, I do think
they were
though
still finding
they're still finding
themselves.
themselves, but that's my point. What if Mushroomhead would have gotten with Ross, and what if he pulled out a completely different Mushroomhead?
And that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
I want to hear that.
I would be a bigger fan of
You know what
Mushroom
I'm
Head
saying? Yeah,
if that was the case. Um, not that I don't like their music because I do,
yeah.
just not
Well, they just
it,
laid
it
into the character, thing a
yeah.
little bit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where Slipknot was more about music that's being played by characters, whereas
Mhm.
Mushroomhead was almost like a cartoon, and
Mhm.
I don't mean that like in a bad way. I'm just saying like visually it was they throw an amazing show and everything, but it's almost like
Yeah.
something you would go and see Blue Man Group in Vegas or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
It's almost overly produced,
Yeah.
and
I think, Slipknot would, well, not so much anymore, but it was like, um, I don't think they were performing. You know what
correct.
I mean? I think
Yeah,
that
it was
was
just all
like,
about just being crazy.
well, they
You know
were
what I mean?
like they were a part of this monster that I read a
Yeah.
quote. I don't remember who said it, Corey or Sean probably, but it was like a monster that they were losing control of. And that was very much like, I don't know, like it was this otherworldly connection to their art that Mushroomhead just didn't have.
Right.
Mushroomhead was, and again, not to say it's not good, but it's a completely different thing when you get down to the actual art
Yeah.
and the actual music. Is a completely different thing.
Right.
Anyways, I'm getting way too deep.
No, no,
into
no.
that.
You're right though, but again, you're right, and that's what I'm saying is like I think like you look at Slipknot before Corey joined with Anders, and
Mhm.
it was and Anders had his
I'm not
own
saying.
energy and his own presence and his own style and all this other stuff. And again, I think Slipknot could have made it pretty well with Anders, but Corey was just the icing on the cake, man. It just happened to be the perfect mixture of
Right.
everything that needed to happen and stuff. But yeah, kind of coming back to it though, it does make you wonder though, like for me, just what Mushroomhead would have been with a different producer. If it wasn't a producer who was looking for the hook and for the clean production and
Hmm.
more of let's dig deep down because this is what I'm going to say. Anybody that's a horror fan, you're a horror fan for reasons outside of I think that's neat. I mean, it's usually comes down to you've had some freaking I don't
Yeah.
want to be like Dr. Phil or something like that, but it's like a lot
Dr.
of people,
Phil.
yeah, but I'm just saying like a lot of people who are like really into horror stuff, they're
Mm,
desensitized to a lot of that stuff and they like it because they are almost in conjunction with pain, where it's like it's almost like cutting yourself, to some people who, they need that or something like that. And so it's like,
self-harm. Yeah.
right. Self harm. And I'm not saying that if you're a horror fan, you're into self harm or anything like that at all. Don't get me
Right.
wrong. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist or anything like that. But I'm just saying, coming from myself, I used to be a real big horror fan and everything. And so my experience was, it was almost like I grew up with a pretty kind of hard childhood and stuff. And so it was almost like I resorted to it because I was comfortable with it,
Sure.
and then once you get away from it and stuff, and there's this other real world, and it's not that, chaotic, mess of blood and all this other stuff, it's like the world's scary because you're able to go into that. And you're also able to use it as kind of a shield too. Like, oh, I watch horror, and, you know, I don't know. And so I just kind of feel with Mushroomhead, it was almost like that's kind of what they adhered to was just the aesthetic and they put it out in front rather than the music. And again, they're great
Yeah.
musicians and I love their stuff, but I really wonder if they would have been able to put that to the back seat and then been themselves and really pulled themselves out and just
Hmm.
as musicians and stuff. And just, I just really, piques my curiosity to see with a different producer what they could have done,
Yeah. I
and
mean, I agree.
that's not saying that they did anything bad, because the other part too that I was going to say to you is because you're like, well, Mushroom has screwed up, but it's also like keep in mind Slipknot has also mentioned that they screwed up on their record deal with Slipknot and they got kind of took, and they've put
Well,
out 10 records. They got signed a 10 record deal and didn't make a lot of money off it. And so,
they were going to get took anyway because that's
right.
just the business model.
It
Like
is. It
it's
is.
every new band, they're going to promise you the world.
Right.
You're going to be a rock star, whatever, but they're going to make their money and
Yep.
it's going to come out of your pocket.
Yep.
That's the reality of the music business. And it always
Correct.
has been. And now there's less money. So now you get even more screwed over.
Sure. Oh yeah, that's just the way it goes.
And anybody will tell you these days, don't ever sign a record deal. If you like your music, don't
Yeah.
ever sign a record deal.
Yep. Yeah, well,
You know?
it's unfortunate. We hear it a lot, especially nowadays, man. There's so many independent people that are
Mhm.
just doing it on their own. That I mean, look at
It's
Post
easy.
Malone. I mean, he made himself famous.
Mhm.
But I mean, yeah. So Mushroomhead they signed to Eclipse Records, which was just a independent, label that was barely anything.
I was gonna say, I don't even remember them. They still
No,
around?
no. And then yeah, but before Eclipse Records, they did 3 records on their own. They had their own label called Filthy Hands, and
Mm.
then they put out 3 records on their own, and they did really well. And so again, it's like I don't blame them for being like, well, we're gonna get a little bit, staunchy with what we're trying to sign here and stuff,
Sure.
because it's like
Mm.
you
It's gotta.
gotta surprise me here with something that makes me feel like I want to stop doing what I'm doing and signing rights away,
That's
because you
fair.
lose
Yeah.
that control.
Yeah.
And
Well,
also keep in mind, Skinny is known for being kind of a control freak. I'm sure at that time that had a lot to do with it too.
yeah.
And I don't
I
mean
can
that in a
imagine.
bad way either, but
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it all depends on
yeah,
kind of what feels correct at the
right.
time.
Yeah,
If you're not getting that feeling that it's the right thing to do, then it's probably not.
correct.
So I mean, I guess, I can't fault them for not doing it if it didn't feel right. And
Right.
these kinds of scenarios, they're not, copy paste either. What was right for Slipknot is probably not going to be right for Mushroomhead, believe it or not.
Sure.
So it was just fortunate for Slipknot, unfortunate for Mushroomhead that
Yeah.
Slipknot's was the perfect path to get where
Yep.
they needed to go.
Right.
Where Mushroomhead has, I
Yep.
mean, at the risk of maybe, making a massive assumption here, but kind of struggled through their
Yeah,
career.
and that's the thing. And again, the whole Slipknot thing. We've talked about this, and it was lightning in the
We talk
bottle.
about Slipknot a lot.
Yeah, we do. But how can he not though? I mean, it's like
It's true.
they were one. They're one of the biggest four of the four. So it's like, what are
Yeah.
you gonna do? So,
Yeah.
but either
Exactly.
which way, back to the controversy. So
Yeah.
again, so that whole was the thing that started off. Who was first? Who's this? Da, da, da. So, but that immediately, immediately set everything off on a bad tone, and in the Midwest especially. And
Yeah, I remember.
so Slipknot's first time going to Cleveland was horrific, dude.
I can imagine.
And people were, dude, there's so much crap that went down. So supposedly, I didn't know this. Everybody knows about the show, right? There's a show that happened in Cleveland, September 11th, 1999 is the actual date that it happened. So they have this show. I didn't know this part. So supposedly Jeffrey Nothing knew that they were coming. So he had signs that he was making by hand, like Slipknot sucks, Slipknot go home, Slipknot's ripping off Mushroomhead, all this other
My
stuff,
God.
handing them out to all of Mushroomhead's fans. And then they showed up to the show and stuff, and they were basically trying to boo them off the stage and all this other crap. And then it just got crazy, and they started throwing batteries and shit on the stage
Ooh,
at Slipknot. And then Paul Gray got hit in the face by a padlock. And then that's when it was like,
Jesus.
okay, we're done. And then they just dove into the crowd. Corey and Jim Root jumped into the crowd and just started fighting people.
I would have
And
too.
yeah. And so they just went crazy on the crowd and stuff. This whole big freaking fight broke out. A crew member was mazed by police and arrested. And it was
Sure.
just, dude, it was just a freaking riot in Cleveland.
I'd be curious to know how many times Slipknot has gone back to Cleveland since then.
Yeah, that would be curious. I'd
Like,
have to look that up and
I'm
find
willing to
out.
bet they waited a little bit, and then once they just exploded, they went back and were like,
Right.
ha ha ha,
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah, I wonder. That would be interesting. But again,
wild. I didn't know
obviously
the padlock thing. That's
yeah.
that's brutal,
God, could you
man.
imagine, dude? Like it's one thing, like batteries would suck. I'm probably gonna incriminate myself here, but that was something that I used to do in high school when like people would freaking like tailgate me. I had to have
Throw batteries.
I'd have, like a bunch of double A batteries in my freaking center console of my car. I just went whoop, like back way off. So
Oh my God.
I'm not
That's
suggesting
gnarly.
anybody do that, by the way. I'm just
That's
saying
gnarly.
it worked.
Hmm.
But either which way, but again,
Hypothetically, you
yeah,
hypothetically did that.
hypothetically in Minecraft. That's what you say, right? In Minecraft, it works.
Yeah.
But no, so I guess like, and then like Jeffrey Nothing, with all that, he said, well, I wouldn't have done this, but my girlfriend was outside the venue and stuff, and Slipknot was giving her a whole bunch of, crap and everything. And I'm just like, true or not true, I have no idea. That would be weird that they would single her out but I guess she was like wearing like a Mushroomhead shirt. And so they were kind of giving her some crap and stuff, but I don't know. Either which way, tensions were freaking rough. Could you imagine though? Like
Early 20s.
right.
They were all still drinking at the time.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Could you imagine, dude? Like, but put yourself in the shoes of Slipknot for a second. Just in both bands, just empathetically, just sitting there thinking, like, what would that be like, right? Like, if you are, so say we're in our home turf and we're known for this one thing, and then this other band freaking gets signed to Roadrunner and is going on this huge tour and all this other stuff, and we're only known in our area, and then that band comes in. Like that would feel pretty freaking crappy, But on the other side of it, though, too, how do you even let your freaking they had to have known that bad blood was there. How do you even I'd be telling my tour manager and stuff like, I don't know if this is a good idea.
I mean,
They had to know something was gonna pop off. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And I'm sure they did. And I mean, those guys back then, I mean, they had, balls the size of planets. You know what I mean? Like they were going to go in there and they were going to, they were going to do some damage no matter what, and they were going to show them up. That was just their attitude.
Yeah.
Slipknot, so yeah, I mean, I'm sure they weren't surprised at how it went.
Right.
I sure wasn't.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that and that surprisingly was there was already a flame there, and then that was the gasoline that just got thrown on it,
He,
and then it just
he,
burned for years.
yeah. Here's the thing, though. You remember? So, what, a couple episodes ago, we were talking about solicitation,
Right.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And it's like, okay, this is a pretty good example. I mean, obviously not the music, but the
Hmm.
look. Like,
That's a
you
good point.
know, was there any legal implication there? It's like, okay, they solicited MushroomHead,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
then all of a sudden you have Slipknot over here after the
Correct.
fact. And it's like, okay, good MushroomHead, and maybe they tried, to sue the label for kind of taking their gimmick, because that's what
Yeah.
it is.
Right.
And then kind of, I don't know.
I don't
Be
know.
interesting to ask. I mean, I would be
Would be.
shocked if they hadn't at least talked to an attorney,
They had to have.
MushroomHead.
Yeah, they had to have. Yeah,
And then the attorney was like, "Yeah, you have no case."
probably. Yeah, because how could you? I mean, unless if you patented it or trademarked it, which they,
Well, the
how do you
one
do that?
connection that comes to mind is the pig mask,
Yeah, exactly.
because
Yeah.
Paul wore one,
Yep.
and what did the guy go by?
Schmatz or whatever. Or no, no,
Wasn't it
no, no.
like
Oh no,
pig
Venus.
Venus?
Yeah, yeah,
Or,
yeah. That's
yeah,
right.
it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
dude, how old were you guys when you came up with these names?
yeah. I don't
It
know.
is kind of funny, but
It
that's
is
like
kinda
that's got
like,
like junior high
yes, it
notebook
totally,
cover
totally
written
does.
all over it. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yep.
Oh man.
Yeah. So anyway, so the controversy continues with all that. That
Mm,
that was like I said, gasoline on the fire, blows up. Now they're doing it, about that time, Mushroom Head's starting to really take off and stuff as well. So now they're just both like in the media and the media stoking the fire too, right?
why not?
And they're interviewing Slipknot about Mushroom Head, and they're interviewing Mushroom Head about Slipknot. And they're both just fighting through the media and stuff. And so like Corey, like he was very adamant that that whole big concert thing was Mushroomhead did all that on purpose, and they could have been killed and all this other stuff. And so F those guys and blah, 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 blah.
Mm.
And then like Skinny, he was like on record and stuff saying that, what did he say? It was like Slipknot was like they traded the platinum sound for dignity, honor, and respect, and then claiming that they sold what they stole. And I was like, dang, that's pretty brutal.
Corey said that.
No, Skinny said that about
Skinny said that
Slipknot.
about Slipknot. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so he's like, they're sold what they stole. And it's like, goodness. But
Ballsy.
yeah, very ballsy. And then so I guess like in 2005, Mushroomhead did a concert where they were mocking Slipknot and they dressed as Slipknot. And then they were playing Slipknot samples while chanting the whole thing, I think it's stolen. And that was like the end of it. Slipknot was super sick and tired of it. They started freaking, really hitting the media then, and
This was
saying
2005.
that was '05. Yeah.
So okay. So I mean, what? When did Volume 3 come out?
That's where
So it's like they were massive at this point. Like I don't
yes.
understand why, Skinny's gonna start, punching above his weight class, because that's what he's doing there.
Yep. Yep.
You know,
Yep. So yeah, that was
I
that
mean,
was the
it's
thing. So commercially,
best to just shut up at that point. Just like
exactly.
let it die.
Yeah, because you're
And
punching way too high.
you lost. You
Yep, you
lost.
lost.
Just
Yep.
accept
Yeah.
the defeat and move on.
Correct. Yeah, because I think Volume 3 hit number 2 on the Billboard 200, and Mushroomhead, I don't even think,
Heard
or
it.
no, I think it got in the top 50 with Save Your Sorrow. So, but
Billboard Top 200.
yeah.
Really?
So, but either which way,
I guess I did not know that they were that successful.
oh, they had some good ones,
Okay.
But yeah. So, but about 2010, then when Paul Gray died, that's when it like, or like, we got to stop this. I mean, everyone was growing up at the time. They're all in their,
Mhm.
probably mid 30s and stuff. I was like, this is dumb,
Yeah.
And so, Mushroomhead put out public condolences. And then because of that, then the feud was done. And then Corey said later that he wanted to, or he had interest in joining a tour, or basically put on a tour of Slipknot, Mushroomhead, Mudvayne, and Guar. And so they were like, oh man, that would be really cool and stuff. Obviously, it didn't happen. But the cool thing is the bad, how do I say it? Because of Paul, dying and stuff, it actually did good by stopping that feud between the two bands and everything. Which is good because it could have got really bad, but I wonder if they have been to Cleveland since then, since everything kind of.
I mean, I'm sure they have, but I'm sure they didn't go back until they were uber massive, or unless it was a stop on Ozfest or something like that.
Right.
I mean, I get rivalry between bands. I mean, I get it. Been there. Not to that extent. But, it's like you get protective of your art, and your show. And, if somebody, seems to have perhaps borrowed your idea.
Right.
It can get pretty heated for sure.
For sure.
Because, like you're spending time and money and energy and all this stuff on what you're doing to have somebody else kind of grab it and take off. Like,
right.
So, I mean, I get why they were pissed.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know. They didn't take it. How do I want to say this? If they took anything, it was conceptual.
Right.
They didn't copy the masks. They didn't copy any of that stuff, and who knows how far the Slipknot concept was in terms of development at that point either. There's just so many, question marks and variables. And it's like, at that point, it's so diluted that who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. At that point, exactly.
Because like from a fan perspective, it's like, okay, the drama was fun for a hot minute, but then it just got old.
It did.
It's like nobody cares.
Because it was going nowhere. It wasn't juicy anymore.
Cares.
It was, nobody cared. Yeah. I mean, I think Des Moines and Cleveland, those fans cared. I think the overall arch, everybody was like, well, I kind of like both bands, so I'm over it,